Hey guys, are you ready to have another conversation about Netrunner?
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert.
I always want to have conversations.
It's good. Robert's here because...
Who, me? About Netrunner? What's going on here?
Why is he here?
I love this game, by the way.
We're having a conversation about Netrunner, but it's really the pretext for a bigger level conversation that I think is a decent starting point for any kind of a card game discussion.
But I don't even have my GED.
You
I'm not ready for this.
I think you do. Not that that matters. Can you deal with concepts? If you can, stick with us, because this is going to be a very conceptual conversation about casual and competitive players.
Across the board?
And really casual and competitive decks.
Gaming?
Casual being a complete myth.
Whoa!
You out there, you say you're a casual player. You're not a casual player.
You can't just drop that.
You're not a casual player. And you know what? You're not playing casual decks.
They weren't even sitting down. There might be personal injuries happening in real time.
It doesn't exist. It's an illusion, and we're gonna dispel it right now. Okay. So this kind of stemmed from the last conversation about Netrunner that we had, which was a more specific look at IG, Faust, Museum, etc.
The current meta.
All of the kind of like symptoms of what may well be a more systemic problem with essentially card games themselves. Now, since that has been released, there's been an FAQ that has essentially just like slashed and burned most of those issues.
Are you taking credit for that?
No, not at all. That was probably long in the works. No, and I was by far not the loudest. There was a lot of loud people about needing change way before that video.
Tim?
No, not really.
Just kidding.
I won't even name them, because you start naming and then like you have to name everybody.
Yeah,
so I'm
it's
not
like
going to do it.
being at the Oscars.
Not going to do it. But essentially, solutions have taken place. We presume that they will help to kind of level things out again, and then the world is right. So come on back to Netrunner. It's all good.
Yeah.
The world is great. AstroScript,
we're
one per
waiting
deck.
for you.
Those kinds of things.
We're right here.
And you know, I find it interesting because we're talking about Faust and IG and Museum, and yet the most significant change to the game was the AstroScript change.
Yeah, totally.
And that kind
of card.
That kind of gets at the reality of how intricate these systems are, because like maybe Museum was only so good because everyone had to also honor AstroScript, and Fast Advance a consistent problem, yada yada.
It snowballs.
Yeah, and we want to dive into all of these deep-seated, kind of more specific conversations. Right now, we're pulling it out or pulling it in
from the bottom up
to the foundations.
Not from the top
down. That's right. But we realize we can't talk about those things until we talk about the foundational things.
Yeah.
So let's start out with this competitive casual total illusion. All right. So here's a couple of comments from the last video, which we appreciated and are relevant here. So I'm going to start with two. Okay. Right. And there are a few more to come. Starting with Suicidal Sandwich, who has commented on our stuff for a long time.
Does he eat
Thank you
himself?
for the support.
How's that work?
I don't know. It's a very good question. It's like that old Threadless T-shirt that had a fish on it, and the fish was the island that you were standing on, and then you were fishing with a fishing pole, and it's like, oh no, if he takes the bait, I don't have an island anymore.
I'm still stuck on Threadless. How do you make a shirt without thread?
Suicidal Sandwich here. All right, so here's the problem. Being competitive. This is the problem, right? It's not any of the cards or anything.
Period.
It's the psychology of being competitive.
Why you even approach the table.
Right. Why you approach. I stopped playing Netrunner because suddenly everyone wanted to be, and I quote, the best in the world Netrunner player MVP 2015. Now, obviously, being a little hyperbolic to make a point, I am not one to shy away from that either. Instead of just playing fun decks. In sports, there's enough people to play house leagues where it isn't about winning, something like the World Cup, but then there's also the pros who play in the World Cup. To me, there was a turning point in Netrunner where everyone thought they and everyone else should be playing on that level of the pros, and people who just wanted to play fun decks here, casual decks, fun decks, were in the minority, and there wasn't enough of us to play in our own house leagues. So the casuals quit, and all you had left at G&Ks, Game Night Kids, regionals, etc., are the hyper-competitive, will play unfun decks so I win a mat players. Okay, there's the first take.
Honestly, there's a lot of loaded terminology.
There's a lot of loaded terminology. We're going to unpack it.
But yeah, we are going to.
I want to unpack it. I want to also mention Matt Germeyer's comment here. He said, I agree with you insofar as this game is edging out the casuals significantly, a consistent theme. The game took a big step towards scaring away casuals last year on the time of Data and Destiny. Faust, DLR decks, and even the Clot mind games really pushed the complexity level. So complexity now playing an impact. The game has continued down the path in the most recent cycle with IG shuffle decks and the awful design of Museum of History, adding to complexity, right? The numbers are down, etc. And unfortunately, he canceled his Covenant subscription because of this, which is losing us money. So thanks,
dang it,
Fantasy Flight. Just kidding. Honestly, I think a lot of this boils down to terrible design decisions. Obviously, there are a lot of factors, but I feel Damon Stone has to be looked at first. Okay,
you said we weren't going to be naming names.
So first, I have to make sure that this is the point. Matt, specifically,
Picking on old Damon.
Damon's design, card designs were not present for Faust, DLR, etc.
He began the Mumbat cycle.
Important to note, 23
Everything
seconds is Damon's first pack. So
it's this? It's Flashpoint, not Mumbat?
Flashpoint. So
Dang.
no scapegoating Damon.
Okay.
This is Lucas we got to scapegoat. No scapegoating Damon.
There's another name.
Right, we've got to.
Lucas.
And now, of course, like Damon's probably involved, Lucas is probably involved, no matter what. And there's internal and external playtesting that goes on. So there's a lot of hats to try to throw into the fire here, if you want to do that. But I will say, we can't just throw Damon under the bus here. Damon is not yet vetted.
It's a true witch hunt now
when it comes to design of this game. And how interesting, what if we didn't know the designers? There'd be way less of this.
That's true. Would people be a little bit more reserved or less angsty about?
Probably, but there would also be more hatred, I think, because whenever you have an anonymous enemy.
So anyway, let's unpack it a little bit more here. So we're talking about people making a transition between competitive, fun/competitive decks to just competitive decks.
Right.
Fun has left the picture because complexity is now higher. You have to be more nuanced, presumably, I guess, in your deck play and construction. And so the final rendering is that because they are so complex, they're less accessible, less approachable, and it runs the people who are just looking for something that is more a casual thing.
So here's
is that even real?
Well, here's the first thing we want to get on the table. Okay. One, there is no such thing as a non-competitive deck. There's no such thing as a non-competitive player. Period.
Please elaborate.
And this is an unpacking of the word competitive. You're entering into a game in which there is one winner and one loser. And if you are not trying to win that game, then it is inherently not a game anymore.
How are you even playing it?
It'd be like if we all entered into a game of Monopoly and said, this game, we're not going to buy property.
It's going to be casual.
Let's just play casual and go around the board. It's like, no, you're not playing Monopoly anymore. It's not a game. The entire premise of the game...
You're not buying services, you're buying properties.
Exactly. Okay. It revolves around two players who are trying to win.
Sure.
Right? So you are a competitive player, and you are playing a competitive deck because you're trying to make the right choices at the right time to give yourself success.
So any game, well, I think every game has a winner and a loser. I don't want to speak too macro because I just don't know. But even if you're playing solitaire, you either won or lost.
With ultimately the sole exception and why there's such a strong genre still to this day is role-playing games.
Ooh.
They actually do not have a winner. It's simply about telling a story.
Is it a game?
It's simply a narrative.
Without a winner
that's a very good question, and I...
Not to delineate too hard.
It is a game, but it is not a competitive game.
Sure, okay.
And I think that every one of these card games is a competitive game, even Lord of the Rings, where you compete against the deck.
There's the thing we need.
So every player is competitive, every deck is competitive. Right. That is just the terminology behind it.
It's inherent. It just happens.
However, I like this term, instead of just playing fun decks. And I'm going to bring in a new player into the discussion. This is Yoda. Yoda with an E before the O.
Whoa.
Says, and this is a good foil to
Alternate
this,
spellings are
some of the most fun I had in Netrunner has been non-interactive decks. CI, which is Cerebral Imaging, 7-point shutdown, False Echo / DDoS decks, Hive Mind, Incubator, Demolition Run combos, and we can presume things like Museum of History and those kinds of things.
All right.
What do you guys see as the main difference between these non-interactive decks versus IG, Gagarin decks currently running rampant nowadays? Which is less of a point that we're trying to make here, but it does play in that, what about the guy that has fun playing Museum? What about the guy that has fun playing Faust? We can't put our own idea of fun on that person.
Yeah, you shouldn't be imposing.
Right. And so Robert, here's what I'm going to put forward here.
Okay.
That
I'm ready.
Every single type of deck has a player that finds it fun, right?
Yes.
So if we really wanted to,
it has to appeal to somebody.
We could maybe break it down into maybe 5 major categories. Maybe it takes 7 or 8. Maybe it takes 10 or 20. But think about this. Think about whenever you play a game like Street Fighter. There's probably a character that you're drawn to that you always want to play.
Yes.
Or whenever you pick up a new game and you say, this is the character I want to use, or this is the style I want to play. You see some kind of synergy. Even, what's your favorite element? Water, wind, fire, earth. What's your favorite?
Wind.
You watch Avatar. Which one do you like? Like, all of these, we all have these personal preferences for what we find enjoyable, fun, cool, exciting, and it usually is in the same sphere, no matter what we're engaging in, right? Even so far as the car that you drive, right? A lot of times that has an impact. Like all of the choices that you make as a person, these choices where we, especially in American society, and this is getting a little heavy, but we have a myriad of choices, right? This free market idea. We have choices. What kind of peanut butter do you buy? What kind of cereal do you eat? And so we are basically told to formulate this idea of image and identity of who we are very, very specifically. That transitions into games, right? So who are you? How are you playing this game? And that makes a statement about you, right? So my whole theory is that the object of a game is to allow for people to express themselves through that game as they want, whether they're playing Museum, IG, or they're playing, Kate, super efficient, have a suite that can break anything, or they're playing Sasha Friedman, 3-year Andy, who was all about trying to get credits and make the right runs.
There's a style to suit any player.
There's an efficiency that he goes after. All of these different types of play styles are fun to the right player and should be equally competitive in an ideal environment.
What a challenge that must be.
Incredible challenge.
Damon.
But isn't this ultimately the challenge of all games?
Yes.
Customizable games.
For sure.
Customizable games. Okay.
Commercial games.
Commercial games as well. Now, Robert, you want to introduce this idea? Tell me about how the commercial aspect plays into this.
I mean, just as the word implies, is that this is something that is being actively attempted to try to be actively sold, like Netrunner, like all these games that we play.
The company has to make money
in our modern age, and they have to appeal, hopefully, to a broad swath of people, both as a viable game in and of itself, but as something that is commercially viable and interesting to a consumer base. Because, and Netrunner is one of these things, but you have to somehow balance the interest of the players and the meta that exists within that player's community, but then also the viability of the product in and of itself. I don't think those are always mutually exclusive or not, but it's another variable in the whole equation that helps drive the system in one way or another, because I don't know, we talk about power creep relative to a meta, and some of these problem cards are symptomatic of power creep. But does a game have to have power creep?
Does it have to have power creep in order to get people to buy it back in?
Yeah, assuming
continue to buy it.
They're within any finite construct that a game represents, there are only so many potential options to exploit its design space, as it were. So once you exploit all of them, do you modify, make some more powerful than others, weaker than others?
Yeah, so that actually has to be factored in. It's not just about designing the perfect machine. The machine also has to sell to a mass audience.
You're right.
So we pretty much agree on this. Now let me bring in Evan Hill. So the main point here being that all players are competitive, all decks are competitive. But whenever you start seeing this dichotomy between fun decks and competitive decks, what that has meant is that all of the people who had fun playing this way can no longer play and compete doing that. Because this deck now is so much better than the way that they want to play that they may as well not play at all.
Yeah, sure.
And then they drop out.
It's obsolete.
And they say it's not fun, and I long for the days where all these different types of ways to play were more even, so that I always had a chance.
Yes, and I got used to playing with a bow and arrow, and this guy shows up with a musket.
Yeah, then it was
like, well, the musket's going to win.
That's the thing, and I don't want to use a musket.
Sure.
Now that's the thing. There's 5 to 10% of the player base, maybe. I mean that's heavy. Maybe 5%, that they see that the musket is beating the bow and arrow, and they say, well, I got to get a musket.
Yeah.
But there's, I think, a much stronger majority of players who say, I want to use a knife, I want to use a bow and arrow, I want to use X, Y, Z. And if I can't do that, then I'm just not going to play.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think
it will run people out.
When you say Faust and these kinds of things are just too strong, it's like I can't play the game the way I want to play because this thing is just so much better. So that's a design problem. Like the balance has gone tipped, and Museum is the same.
Though just to be a devil's advocate / foil to that, I mean, is there a certain onus or obligation of a player who is ultimately interested in a game to adapt to the changing circumstances of a game and its meta at large, and the cards available, all that kind of stuff?
There is an element of that, so we can't discount it. That's where it gets a little tricky. There's an element of the metagame. There's an element of the metagame where your favorite deck should be both the soul. It's about the soul of the deck, Robert. This is where it gets to me.
Whoa.
It's the soul of it. I know. It's like what a Swedenborgian take on this.
This inanimate object has a soul.
So there's a specific way a deck has to play.
Okay.
And then there are kind of tertiary elements around it that will kind of improve or change its win-loss ratio,
Okay, yeah.
depending on the meta, but the soul remains the same. Like, for instance,
It's still a chocolate cake, but now it's buttercream.
but now it's got buttercream icing.
That's right.
So you have...
Which I always want. I don't want them to change my buttercream.
You have this beautiful Lord of the Rings deck,
Okay.
for instance. Now, this is a competitive game, even though you're not competing against others.
It's just a static competitor.
And you came into this game and you realized very early that pretty soon you would be able to play the White Council with all of the rings, right?
Yes.
Just an incredible thought, right?
It is incredible.
And so the soul of that
excite.
deck is the White Council and the rings,
Sure.
right? Now you're willing to change things outside of that and still say
Yes.
this is my White Council deck, but the second that you have to take members of the White Council out to be better at the game,
No longer interested.
it's just not a deck you want to play
Correct.
anymore, right? So I feel it's very similar to me, like when I think about Netrunner, for instance. Let's say I have a Wizard account Siphon deck,
Okay.
right? And I want to
Which
play
he
this.
does.
I want to play this like aggressive, early on aggro resource exchange deck, trying to basically take the corp out of the game.
Okay.
I'm willing to do that so far as I have account Siphon, basically period,
okay.
and maybe a few other cards. But if we get to a meta where account Siphon just doesn't work anymore, I don't want to just play any old deck.
What do you do?
That's
Yeah.
gonna work. I don't want to replace account Siphon with Faust and call it a day, right? It's like, no, the whole point of the deck was account Siphon. That doesn't work anymore, so I just don't want to play because
Sure.
that's what I wanted to do in the game.
Yeah.
That's not actually the case, but it's a good example. So let's bring Evan Hill into this. He says, yes, 1 million, that's 6 zeros. 1 million times yes. I'm a systems designer, take note. Look him up on LinkedIn. I'm a systems designer myself, and you've echoed my sentiments exactly. Netrunner needs to be balanced for fun just as much as competitive viability. And I feel like this is kind of getting to the point.
It is.
But it's that
me.
if you're playing a game and winning said game leaves you in a state where the majority of your player base is not having fun, you've failed.
To the sidelines, yeah.
That is a failure. Every game must be fun, no matter what you're engaging in.
Maybe that's
through the
ultimately
game.
all the game is.
Truly.
Is it fun?
Truly.
And you play it.
And so, with that in mind, let's draw the bigger picture here.
Let's
so
close out the circle.
The game must be fun,
Has to be fun.
and it must also be openly competitive, right?
Okay.
So you have competitive design, you have fun design. They should not be separate things. You cannot release both fun cards and competitive cards. It doesn't work. Every card must be both, right? Period.
I would hope so.
It must
in
be.
a perfect world.
And now you say to me, but Steven, I am the guy who has fun playing Museum.
Sure.
And it's like, that's all well and good. However, the game succeeds the most when you hit the most amount of people who are both winning and having fun.
Yes.
Period. Okay? So that's what any design of any game needs to look to do. And I think that's where the problem has kind of displayed in Netrunner, that winning has taken such a tiny percentage of the ways to play that now the 90% ways that we used to have fun are no longer viable, and players are like, wait, this isn't why I liked Netrunner, I'm out.
Wow. That's,
Right?
I hope that's not the case.
No, it's not the case. I mean, I think that's kind of the sentiment.
But yeah, it is the sentiment. It's probably, at a certain point, I think every game goes through some sort of, period or cycle where that most definitely is the case. There's only one real way to do this as well that beats everything else or is better than everything else.
And we kind of approached that point with Netrunner, and then Damon, bless his heart, from what I can tell, just totally obliterated the problems.
Pretty unprecedented.
I mean,
as far as I can tell.
just laid it out, and we're now going to see the fruits of that. And I've already seen tons of players coming back and more excitement coming back. So
sweet.
That's
great.
Yeah, there's a check against it, but I think recognizing the problem and saying to any game designers or would-be game designers, here's my theory, and I would love to know everybody's opinion out there.
Sure,
right?
please.
Is that let's assume that we have 7 different types of players. Let's say we have the efficiency player, the kill player could be a type, or the dramatic events player.
But just say no player where they cancel everything you do.
Yeah, you could have the cancel player, the shut down my opponent player. You could have the solitaire player. You could have the adaptability player, which is me, ideally. You could have all sorts of these kind of players. All games are at their best when the maximum amount of personas are being given the tools to both win,
accommodated,
and to have fun, right? Because you're not going to have fun if you're not winning ever.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah.
But if you can give everyone at least a 25% chance to win any match that they come across, everybody's still playing the game.
Yeah,
And more and more people show up because I can play Ryu and I might not have a great matchup against
Baraka.
Blanca, but I can sure as heck like have a 25% chance to win. That's all I'm looking for.
Sure as heck.
But if I have a 5% chance to win against Museum and I can't play the way that I want to play, then I have no business playing.
That sounds right.
That's it. All right, and then finally,
any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I do want to. I think this is interesting to bring up. Jason C says, "I couldn't agree more. You guys have hit the nail on the head to what we just said." So congratulations.
wow.
I'm just kidding.
Nice.
That was 3 weeks ago. The game has become less
future.
fun and longer, and has become more difficult to build a deck that can deal with everything else that's out there. And I think
That's
that
complexity.
as a result, I find myself playing less. In fact, I've recently organized a restricted list league in our hometown, and the majority of players are on board with it. I think this speaks to what we're talking about, right?
Okay.
I didn't have fun given the state of the game because the way I wanted to play wasn't working anymore. So I changed the rules to make more play styles work in the environment.
Sounds right. And a foil to even that is, and this is something that I've kind of heard tangentially, but I think it speaks to the same issue here, is whether or not even within the LCGs, is the rotation waiting too long? Should they dial it back by another like 1, 2, 3, however many cycles you deem? Because even, I think they said like 1,200 cards in the active pool is their target, at least as a maximum. But is even that too much? Is that too much complexity? Is 1,000 better? Is 800 better? You name it.
Certainly there's a point where the more complex something gets, the harder it is to maintain these bar graphs of power among your different player archetypes.
Totally.
So I think that's fair. Well, there you have it, guys. There's a little conversation. There's more to come on this. I think we want to continue to unpack these ideas.
I mean, truly, we'd be here for hours.
Truly.
Truly.
But we would love to hear from you guys in the comments section, and look forward to that later on.
Yeah.
I'll go over them with you, and we'll get together and have a pint of Founders and talk about where we went wrong and where our philosophical errors ultimately were.
Great.
Thank you for watching, guys. We'll see you again on some future discussions.
Bye.